Okay, so today is a special open studio session, and I'm going to cover lighting and shading and color comps and values. And there's so many different ways to approach your illustration. You probably already have a method in which you do it. So what I'm going to share with you is just a couple different ways to approach your illustrations in terms of your planning. I think it's really important to plan, at least that's what I learned, was that it's important to plan out the lighting and the color and what the options are in your illustration before you actually begin rendering it, because sometimes you'll have kind of an idea of what you want it to look like in your head, and if you don't plan it out and you just kind of go with that one idea, it may or may not turn out successfully. So these steps kind of give you a way into your project so that you can kind of problem solve, so that in the end, when you're rendering, you can just spend time rendering. And so yeah, if you're digital painting, there are so many ways to get one final result. And I'm going to show you a few different methods to do that. So, but before I do, I wanted to talk about lighting and shading and what light logic is and just the basics of that, and then tonal values and why tonal values and understanding lights and darks are important in creating contrast and emphasis in your artwork, and then how you can design, I guess, the lighting and shading in your artwork so that you can have more contrast in the right areas and emphasizing the focal points and kind of de-emphasizing the other things like the secondary and tertiary objects or elements in your artwork. Okay. All right. I'm going to share. First, I'm going to go into, here. All right, so this is a page from Juliet Aristide's, what's it called? It's a really good book. I forget what it's called, but I use this all the time. And to understand light, you first need to understand how lighting affects form, and the easiest way to do that is on a sphere. And if you can create lighting and shadow on a spherical form and creating cast shadows from that object, then you can take that information and use that lighting and shading knowledge to create form in your artwork on pretty much anything. It's kind of like in the Lego world. To be a Lego master builder, you have to be able to build a spherical Lego, like a ball, from blocks of bricks. And once you can build that, you can basically build anything. So understanding lighting on the spherical form is going to really help. All right. So basically what you want to know is that there are, you probably want to have like 3 values in your artwork. We've got light values, mid values, and then the dark values. And the light values are basically where the light is hitting the object of your form. And you can see there's a 9 scale values from 1 to 9, and 1 to 4 are the lightest values, and those are going to be in the light area. So anywhere where the light is hitting your object. With 1 being the specular highlight. And the specular highlight is basically the reflection of the light bouncing off the object into your eye. And that will usually be white or the lightest, brightest area of the object, okay? And then the shadow side, you can see is 7, 8, and 9. And that is basically the area on the form where the light ceases to exist. It does not hit that side of the form. And the core shadow is basically the line where the light stops hitting the form. And that is actually the darkest part on the form, right? You can see how it jumps from, let me move this. It jumps from 6 to 8. And basically the reason is because the 8 is the core shadow, and that's basically the darkest area. Okay, so in fine art, a lot of times we'll use the core shadow, or even in an illustration, you want to use the core shadow to be like the shape line of your shadow. That's where the shape line of your shadow would be if you were describing the shadow on a form, right? And then in between the shadow and the light are the mid values. And the mid values are basically, it's between the light and the dark. And that is also usually where you're going to find most of when you're rendering and you're coloring. That mid value area is basically where you're going to find the most saturation in color on an object. So if you're painting an apple red, if you're painting a red apple, that would be where like the truest red would be. The red color would be in the mid values. It gets a lot darker in the shadow areas, and it gets a lot lighter in the light values. And then in terms of temperature, depending on the temperature of your light, if you, let's say, are, well, I don't know if I should get into this right now, but yeah, I'll talk about it. So if you are painting a red apple and you have a warm light on your apple, then that warm light might be like an orange or yellow light, and that might create a warm tone in the light area. And then most likely you have a cool shadow opposing that. So the core shadow and the shadow areas would be like a reddish purple color. Okay. So anyway, this is something to kind of understand and recognize. That when you're doing values, you're going to have your lightest areas, your darkest areas, and your mid value. And what I usually will do is I will kind of, I will compress the light areas into one light value. Instead of having 1, 2, 3, and 4, I will just have, let's see, I'll just have like, let me go in here. Oops. We're gonna turn this on here. Okay, so I'll pick this area here. So this will all be, this might be my lightest value that in my thumbnails, okay? And then I'll take the mid, I'll take the mid value. It's actually a little bit grayer. Let me do that, go here. Okay. And then for the darkest values, I might just use a dark gray. All right. So in terms of understanding light, you just need to know that there's 5 elements to lighting an object. There's always like a highlight. If you have a light source, there's going to be a highlight side. The incident highlight, which is kind of like around the area. The core shadow, I'm sorry, the incident highlight is like around the lighted area. The core shadow is this line where am I at? Let me go on top of there here. Okay. So this is like the core shadow right here. You can see it on this ball because it's creating this jagged line. Since there's a plane, there are planes on this form. So you can see how that edge is, okay? And then the shadow side is all this over here. Now, I'm going to talk about the cast shadow yet, but we'll talk about that right now. So what happens is there's usually going to be a cast shadow. Oh wait, is incident highlight like the brightest part of the highlight side? I think so. I wrote those notes a while ago and I forgot what they are. I'll look it up. The cast shadow is basically where the light stops on the form and creates a silhouette of the form on whatever surface plane is underneath it. Okay, so that is what the cast shadow is. Now, right underneath is a dark shadow, or we can call this an occlusion shadow. And basically it's where the object is touching the ground surface or another area and no light can get into that area. Okay, so the cast shadow has a shadow shape. Oops, let me go on here. Oops, let me turn that on. Okay. The cast shadow has a shadow shape, but what happens is it gets a little bit lighter out here. It's really dark right in there because like no light can bounce in there. Light is basically waves and it bounces all over everything. So if you first of all understand that concept, that's going to be really helpful because wherever there is light, it radiates and bounces off of all surfaces. So you have a light hitting this surface here. You also have light, wherever this light is coming from over here, it's going to be hitting other objects or other areas over here, and it will bounce into the cast shadow and the core shadow. So this core shadow here is basically where the light ceases to exist, but then light bounces off of other objects and it hits this area in here, which is why it gets a little bit lighter. But basically this line right here is defining where the shape of the shadow is going to be on the form. Okay, so you're going to have light bouncing, reflected light. Let's write that, reflected light. Okay, that's going to bounce off to your form here, and it's going to bounce into your cast shadow. So usually in your cast shadow, you might have a really sharp line, depending on, we'll talk about that too, depending on the intensity of the light. And sometimes it'll get a little bit softer, but there's usually going to be a really, really dark occlusion shadow or pit shadow. Okay, I call it pit or occlusion. And that's basically where the object is touching the surface of the form where it's sitting upon. Okay. All right. Oh, let's keep that. Oh, I didn't mean to do that either. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to the next thing, which is, let's see, in the painting, color, and light class, Danny Vondere, who was teaching that class, did a really nice job on it. So if you're a member, you get access to that, those recordings if you weren't in the class. And if you were in the class, then you probably remember this. But he talked about light and basically how the light hits a surface will affect its cast shadow, okay, whether it's long or short. And I like the way he illustrated this because it just shows how where the light is, the shadow kind of radiates out from all those points there, okay? So now, depending on your light source, whether it's like if it's the sun outside, it's the moon, it's interior with like a lamp, or like it's coming from all kinds of lights, all kinds of directions, that the type of light that you have is going to affect how your form is going to be seen. Okay. And basically we're using light to create the feeling of dimension and form. Now, when you're doing illustrations and you are wanting to do realistic illustrations that have like depth and stuff, you can totally use this, but you don't have to. Like, you don't have to use lighting and shading or realistic modeling of forms in your illustrations if you don't want to at all. That's the really great thing about creating a style for your work. So, but in terms of understanding how that works, I wanted to kind of depict that here too. Okay, so really quick, I just wanted to talk about how, let's see, where is this at? Okay, that's my line work. That's my shadow. I'm going to do this here. Okay, so let's say real quick, if you had like a light, a really bright light that was hitting this object and it was really close. Okay, so like this is the light that's really close. Then you're going to have the shadow is going to be a lot closer, or the core shadow is going to be a lot closer to that light source. And then depending on where that shadow is hitting, let's see, we could, if we were to do something like this, if it, let's say, is like a pin light, then the shadow would be something like this. It would be really big. And then, you know, there would be all this shape around it. Okay, so if the light is further away, what happens when the light is further away? Like, let's say it's coming from a light source that's really, really far, then what will happen is the light wouldn't have that close of an angle. It might be more parallel. Okay. So then you'd have the shadow kind of like this, and then wherever this hits, you'd have that kind of the core shadow there. And then you'd have this kind of small thing there. All right. Now, if we had the light coming from the back, you'd have kind of a core shadow like this, where it would be following the form. And then you'd have this cast shadow back here. But you'd also have some like reflective light. Let's see here. That would kind of, is that not, I want white. There we go. And this would get a little bit softer out here. Okay. All right. And then, so that's some of that basic stuff. Okay. So here you can see how the light is hitting this surface here. There isn't really a highlight. No, actually, that's another thing to talk about is depending on the surface of the form, if the surface of the form is more shiny or glossy, it might give more of a highlight, a specular highlight than something that is more matte or has a flat finish that isn't really shiny and is kind of has a dull texture. You won't see that much of a specular highlight. All right, so here is the core shadow here, but what's also happening is we have the light is pretty close and it's hitting the surface here. And what's happening is that as it hits the surface, it's bouncing off that bottom part and it's actually lighting up this bottom part. So even though this is the core shadow here and the darkest part is up here, we have some reflected light coming down here. But we can see that the cast shadow is creating a shape that's like right here. And that is also, the light is bouncing off of this surface here and then bouncing off of this surface, and then it's actually hitting the inside of that shadow. And then back here, this is where like the pit shadow would be, or the occlusion shadow, because it's touching the ground and it's the darkest here. And then it gets a little bit softer. So the closer your object is to the form, the more crisper your shadow will be. And you can see how the shadow is a little bit softer on the edge out there. Okay. So that's something to be mindful of. Okay. So why is tonal values important? All right. So let me do this real quick. Okay. So the reason why you want to do tonal values in your artwork is because you can plan or design your lighting. You can also define where your emphasis is by creating contrast on your focal points, okay? So tone basically represents the volume and mass of form and the space between solid things. And that is all tonal value is. It's just defining form. Now, like I said before, you can make illustrations that don't have any volumetric form depicted in it. If you want to just do flat colors, that's totally fine too. Like if you're doing a web comics and you want to just do flat color, that's fine too. But if you wanted to do, if you wanted to plan your flat colors, but then still be mindful of creating contrast with tonal values in your work, meaning like having your subjects or your characters more saturated in color or darker or lighter against a lighter dark background, then those are things you want to know. So objects are separated from one another in our field of vision because of value. So basically, when you look at a box, let me do this really quick see if I can escape this really quick. I'm going to go back to this. Okay, so when you are looking at a box, let me do this again. Okay, a cube. Okay. So we know that a cube has form because we can see that it has, let's do this again. Okay. Values on it. All right, so this box has 3 values. It has a light value, it has a dark, a light value, a mid value, and a dark value. Okay. Okay, so our eye understands that if this area is lighter up here, our brains understand that this is the lightest area is basically where the light is hitting the object, right? And then the darkest area is where there is no light because we see a shadow, all right? So when we see form, when we see objects that have light and shadow, we understand that that is form. And this is going to read as a cube because we understand what a cube looks like. Now, camouflage, the way camouflage works is camouflage basically takes lights and darks in a pattern like this, and it jumbles them up. Okay. So if you've seen army camouflage, it looks kind of like this. All right. And what's the purpose of that? Well, the purpose of camouflage is to hide or hide things, right? They put camouflage, the army guys wear camouflage so that they blend in with their background. They have camouflage tarps that they put on top of their tanks or their areas. And basically what that does is, like, if you're basically trying to hide the form. So if we were to camouflage this, it might look like something like this, where we would take some of these dark forms and move them around like this. Okay. So that's what camouflage does, is it confuses the eyes so that you can no longer read light, mid values, and darks on forms. And then you can't see that an object is there because from far away, because it doesn't look like it has any form. Okay, so that's what camouflage does. Okay, so when you're planning out your total value comps, when you're developing illustrations, one really easy way to do it is by using 4 tonal values. Okay, so you can use white, light gray, dark gray, and black, and that's basically the easiest way to do it. Okay. The simpler the presentation of a subject, the better it will be pictorially. So that means that if you simplify it in 4 values instead of like thinking about all 9 values, and you organize that, it'll read better. Simple organized values brings clarity and appeal to your images. Okay, so this is from Andrew Loomis' creative illustration. And he basically has 4 different ways that you can arrange values on your image. One being with the white background, one with a light gray background, one with a dark gray background, and one with a black background. Now, you can probably think of like what images or illustrations you might use for each of these tonal value depictions. Like something where you're putting gray values on a white background might be something where you're doing an illustration of something like in the middle of the day, or where there's a lot of sun, it's really bright, or it's kind of like has a happy mood, or maybe you're doing something like a snow scene where there is just a lot of light, and the only shadows, there's going to be very few shadows, like maybe high noon, an illustration where you're doing something where the light is right directly above all the characters, and there's very, very little cast shadows because the sun is directly overhead, so there's no shadows. And the dark values are going to be few and far between. That might be the type of scene that you would use for grays and black on a white background. And then conversely, grays and white on a black background might be something where you're like in a dungeon or in a cave, or it's a nighttime scene, or it's a moonlit scene where mostly things are really dark and there's a lot of shadows because there's only one light source, and maybe that might be a lamp or a candle or the moon or some kind of small light that's softly radiating out and is not creating a whole lot of light. In our class, we looked at Tony DiTerlizzi's book, The Spider and the Fly, and that has this kind of tonal value pattern, right? So you can actually kind of decide or plan by, first of all, deciding which background you want to use, whether you want to use white, light gray, dark gray, or black. And you can experiment or explore with all of them, or you could just explore with one or two, depending on if you have, like, if you know your scene is dark, then obviously you don't really need to use the white background, because that wouldn't be serving your story. So, but these are different options that you can use. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. So this is kind of like a way of doing that, where you're going to be arranging your lights and darks. This is going to be where we're talking about the focal point. So the focal point in your illustration is going to be your main character, which is going to be your center of interest. And so in your center of interest, for your focal point, you want to create a large range of contrasts in or within or around your focal point. Okay, so that means you're going to include white and dark values, or probably a full range, the full range of values. Okay, and the reason why is because our eye inherently goes to areas of contrast, lightest and darks, or darks and lights. So if you have in a high key illustration, which is high key means that you're using like mostly light values, and you have one little spot of black or a dark area that's surrounded by other grays, that black area is going to be the area of most contrast, and that's going to be where your eye goes to. Remember, when we're creating illustrations, all we're doing is trying to manipulate the viewer to look at the thing that we want them to look at. Okay. And the reason why we want them to look at the thing we want them to look at is so that they see what we want them to see immediately, and it resonates with them. Okay. And that's all illustration is, or visually communicating an idea, is basically just communicating an idea of a character in a story and then directing your viewer's eye to that thing. And so understanding how to manipulate tonal values is going to help you is going to help you understand how to use lights and darks and where to put them, and making sure that you put them in the area that you want them for your focal point, so that your viewer looks at that first and foremost, or at least stumbles upon it. And you can also use lights and darks. It doesn't just have to be like your area of greatest contrast is in your main center of interest. You can have patterns of light and dark all around your illustration, which will then allow your eye to kind of go through the image or go through the painting. And when your eye travels around the image, because there are interesting areas of tonal values or tonal contrasts, that's what keeps the eye engaged in your illustration. And that is whenever you're looking at an illustration and there's lots of things to look at, it's kind of like fun to kind of pour over, and your eye is discovering lots of things. Like that is what we kind of describe as an appealing piece of work. Oh gosh, what is his name? He does the color gamuts. There was a scientific thing that was done where they studied the eye as people were looking at artworks, and they studied the path of where their eyes would go while they were looking at different artworks. And so if your eye can travel around your illustration and looking for interesting areas of contrast in the areas where you want, and there's like a feeling of rhythm or flow or movement in your illustrations, then that creates interest, and that is what creates kind of the appeal in an illustration. Things that happen where your eye is like drawn to areas that aren't of interest, or your eye leaves the painting because you're directing the eye outside of the painting, that makes an unappealing painting, because then your eye is not engaged in the painting. Your eye leaves the painting. So these are things to kind of think about, how you can map out tonal values in your illustrations to create contrast. So you can do that with a high key, low key, full range tonal values. Anything that you do will be like creating areas of contrast. So you can create a dark focal point that's surrounded by light down here, or you can have a light focal point that's surrounded by dark. Okay, so those are just things to be mindful of. All right, and then I wanted to show you some of my past student work and how they used tonal values in their small thumbnail comps to kind of direct the eye. And this student used 5 values. I think sometimes I would say use 4 values or 5 values, but the student used 5 values, and you can see how they're thinking about the light source, and they're also thinking about they're also thinking about where they want the area of most contrast to be. Okay, so in this one, she's thinking about like kind of having a sunset and what that sun would do and how that might affect the whole setting. And then in this one here, we had a student who was working on a digital painting of a knight that was being like kind of slaying a serpent. And so in this, he was playing around with the different lights of light gray, light gray, and then dark gray backgrounds. And you can see how here he's kind of playing with just the light kind of coming from a far away, like off in the distance, and how that might look to the characters in the foreground. And then this one is more of a snowy scene. So it's mostly light, and then the characters are dark. And the area of most interest is where the character is kind of slaying the beast. And so you can see there's white and black and gray right in there. And then there's like a directional movement that's happening that draws our eyes in. Okay. So that's that. Now, what I wanted to do is kind of talk about how you can, different ways that you can play around with grading values. Okay, so I'm going to do this live with you. I haven't done this yet. This is due in like a couple of days. This is my Disney art. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go through this process of the different ways that you can approach creating comps, value comps, and color comps, and then show you how to do it, because like I said, there's like so many different ways to get any one result. And actually what I can do before I show you that is I can show you what I did. Let's see here. Do I have it up? For the soul, I don't have that up here. Let me get that really quick. And then I will show you the soul color comps. There we go. Okay, and then if anybody has a question, just go ahead and like raise your virtual hand or put it in the chat. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys this because I was kind of going through my colors the other day, and these What you want to do,
There we go.
you see it now?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, sorry, it took a while. Okay. So you're gonna want to take your thumbnail drawing and duplicate it a couple times and I usually do at least 6. So this is the one where I was straight up just choosing colors based on this set of colors down here. And these are really saturated. And that's kind of what I was going for. But then as I looked at it, you also want to give yourself another day or two, like to give your eye a rest from your work if you can. If you can give yourself a day or two to just kind of get fresh eyes on your artwork before you really begin like rendering, that's always a helpful thing. You can also ask other people for feedback, but if you're, like me and you're like a lone illustrator, giving yourself some fresh feedback, fresh time to look at your artwork is good. And then another thing too is in Clip Studio, or they have this reverse button here in the navigator, and it's just this little button up here with the 2 triangles that are facing each other. This is another way of getting
Love,
fresh.
can you run your cursor over what icon it is you're
right here.
There we go.
Right up here in the navigator. And you can do this all the time, like whenever you're drawing any kind of composition. This is always a great way to just give yourself a fresh eye on what it is that you're doing, because your eye will get really accustomed to that.
Is it inverting, or what is it actually doing?
It's just flipping horizontally.
Oh, okay.
You see that? It's not doing anything, it's just flipping it horizontally.
So you see it in a different way.
Yeah.
And also the up and down can be good too, because then it makes it abstract.
Yeah, that's true.
Next to the left and right. Let's try that. Because one of the things when we used to work traditionally all the time, we'd hold things up in the mirror.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not flipping upside down.
No, it did. It flipped upside down.
Oh, there we go. Good. So you can see now where it's most saturated. So we're looking at shapes rather than looking at people and instruments. It kind of fools the eye.
Absolutely. That's such a good point that you made, Mira. Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I'm from the old school, and we used to look at things.
Yeah, we'd hold it up, right, in the mirror, or you'd like, another thing is to like walk away from your painting, right? And if you were to just walk away from your painting, let me put this back, that's basically just zooming out. So one thing you could do is also zoom out on your work so it's like really small. And if things are reading to you in a way that you want them to read, like the lights and darks are reading the way you want them to read, then that's another helpful way to get a fresh eye on them. All right, so basically what I did, I'll just show you really quick what I did. So I created these 6 color comps, and I used basically just these colors down here that I pulled from the reference of, these are screen captures from the movie. And then I also had like these images here too. So I was looking at the color of the night of the jazz band in the nightclub. And that's where I pulled the colors from. And once I did that, I came up with these, and I gave myself some time, and I thought, I really liked one of these, but then I also wanted to play continually a little bit more. And then I'm going to show you how to do this too, but I also used Clip Studio has an AI colorization, and what it does is it automatically fills in color wherever, like it fills everything in for you, and it just chooses random colors and it fills it in. So this is what Clip Studio gave me as a randomizer, and it did some interesting things that I thought.
I like this.
Yeah, it did some really interesting things. Like in this one, it gets a little dark, but
But that orange pops.
yeah, that orange really pops. And that's not something that I had thought about doing in my piece. So I kind of took this one here. I took this one here, and I combined it. Let's see.
And where is that AI autocolor thing?
Oh, I'm going to show you in a minute. I'll show you how to work it in a little bit, like towards the end, but I'll show you where it's at. It's edit, colorize is under edit menu and colorize technology preview, and you can colorize all. Okay, so if I were to like, oh, I guess I might as well just do it here. I can do it here.
Okay, can you do it again slow?
Yeah, I'm going to click on the line art here. So my selected is the line.
Where are you? Sorry.
I'm in my, sorry, I'm over here.
In your layers, yeah.
The layers. So I've selected my layer, my line layer, and then under the edit menu, you go down to colorize technology preview. And then if you press colorize all, this menu will pop up. Now you have to be connected to the internet, because what it does is it sends the information to the Clip Studio server. It like configures it and then it sends it back. So I'm going to press OK. And then it's going to send me, it sends me like literally the exact same thing, because it's a computer. So it'll fill in the color in an interesting way. And since I have 6 different ones, it kind of gave me 6 variations, which is kind of fun. Okay. So what I did was I took this one down here and I combined it with the one that I really liked, which was, let me go here, I'll turn this off. Okay. So I really liked, let's see, actually, I did some other ones too. I did more color comps, and I did this color comp with gradient maps, which I'm going to show you how to do too. And I will show you how to do that. That's what it's all coming, but I wanted to show you my process. So basically what I did was, okay, I took one of these other ones. Let's see here. I took one of these. I think I took this one here. Okay. I took this image here up at the top right, and I made it into a black and white. I converted it into a black and white image. Okay. And then when I use that black and white image, this is what I did with it. I adjusted the levels on it so that it got a little bit lighter. Okay. So I made it even lighter. Little bit lighter. And then what I did was I created some gradient maps of color. Okay. And I'll show you how to do that right here. I just put 2 gradient maps, or I put a gradient map here.
Sorry, darling, am I looking on the left or on the right?
We're going to look at this, this one here.
Okay.
We're looking at the purple one. Okay.
And
I'm going to show you.
Completely confused. Is confused. Darling, you need to slow down a little, okay, and give us the in-between steps. You know, because I've got a 27-inch screen. I'm looking left, I'm looking right, and I don't know where you are.
Well, I'm going to explain all this in a minute. I just wanted to show really quick how I got to it, and then I'll do the step by step.
Shut up then.
Okay. Yeah, I'll show you how I did this in a step by step. But I wanted to show you that I came up with these ones, and then I came up with this illustration here, and then I took the AI colorized version here. This was the colorized version from the other one. Yes. I took that and I superimposed it on top of this one here at 50%. So I'm taking basically two color versions and I created a new color version here. So this was the one that I'm using as my color comp. And I'll show you how I'm doing that right now. This is my work in progress. So I took the color comp and I'm going to show you how I did all this basically, but I took the color rough right here. I blew it up, enlarged it. I drew my lines that I wanted to see on top. I used a white pencil so that I could see it on top of my colors. And then what I'm doing now is I'm rendering on top of that. And this is how I'm going to create my final. So you can see how I'm using like an oil painting brush and I'm really rendering in the color, but basically all I'm doing is just color picking from underneath for my color rough, and I'm rendering the form out a bit more. And it's going to take me some time to go all the way across this whole page. I got to do this whole thing. But basically, I've got my colors mapped out of where I want everything to be. And basically what I'm doing is rendering everything out. Okay, so that's just a really quick sneak of what you can do. And now I'm going to kind of show you how to do that using this one here. So I will go through everything really slowly here. All right.
Thanks, love.
Yes. So the first thing is we talked about color and we talked about value. So I'm going to do some value comps. All right. And right now, what I have here is I have light gray, medium gray, and dark gray. And I have all of that on one layer. It's my layer. I called it value. Okay. And all I did was basically show you what I did. Okay. I'm going to delete this. Okay. Is I just use my selection tool, a rectangle selection tool, and I go right on top of my thumbnail. Actually, it's not on top, but I create the space of it. Now, in Clip Studio Paint, we have this little toolbar that pops up. I can fill this in, but I want to choose my color. So I'm going to choose this medium gray color right in my color wheel. And then I'm going to press fill and that'll fill it in with gray. Okay. Then I come here to deselect it. And all of my value is on one layer and it's all underneath my line layer. Now I'm going to keep my line layer up at the top and I'm going to lock it. I'm going to lock it so that I don't accidentally color on it. I'm going to do most of my work for my values on the value layer. And now I'm going to alpha lock that. By alpha locking it, that locks the transparent pixels and it just makes it neat so that anytime I paint, it's only going to be on the gray areas. Okay, so that's just going to keep it neat. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a value scale really quick. Okay, of light gray, medium gray, dark gray. Okay. And I'm going to use that value scale. I'll even use some whites and I'll use some blacks. Okay. I'm going to move this up here. Okay. All right. So on my value layer, I am going to use, just for ease and efficiency, I'm going to use the lasso fill tool. That is my best friend because all I have to do is draw the shape and it will fill the shape with whatever color I have selected. So what I want to do is I'm going to go, since I'm on the lightest gray background, I'm going to color pick the black and I'm going to set my blackest areas here. And I don't know where those would be, but I might put it as thinking about like the occlusion shadows that I was talking about before, the pit shadows. That would be in areas where any of these objects are touching the surface of a form. So I don't think I'm going to have too many black areas. Now I'm going to choose the dark gray, and I'm going to use the dark gray, and I'm going to fill in the back of this chair here. And you can see how I'm actually have reference here. These I got from a screen cap. So I'm going to be using those as my reference. And I want the area of interest to be obviously Alice and the Mad Hatter. And now I'm going to, let's see here. Let's see her hat. Let's see. Mostly, I think I'll do, now I'm going to do, I think I'm going to go skip to white. Okay. So I know that her apron is going to be white. Let's see, I probably want to have like these explosions as light. And let's see, I think that might be it. Everything else is light gray, really light gray. So I'm gonna play around with all the light gray areas here. Her hair, let's see here, maybe this teacup here, these lanterns up here, these are lanterns up there, and then his hair is going to be light. And then I think their skin tone is going to be kind of a like a mid-gray value. Okay. And I think everything else I can probably fill in with some mid-grays. These are all the cups and saucers that are, and cups and saucers and teapots that are around. Okay, and then I think I might do some lighter grays. There's going to be some puffs of smoke, I guess, maybe not smoke, actually, that's the steam from the teacups. And let's see, well, the March hare, sorry, he's going to be gray. And then we'll put maybe, I want to show the little mouse. So I'm going to put some dark areas around there. So I'm kind of trying to plan where my darks are going to be, because I want my focal point to be having a contrast. Okay, so I'm going to have this guy here, and then I think the little mouse is going to be dark, maybe with a little bit of light on him. And okay, so that might be good. All right, so what I'm seeing here is that like I have a lot of contrast in that area up here where the March hare is and the Mad Hatter. Okay, and he's got some areas that are kind of dark on him. All right, so that's kind of basic. All right, I'm gonna skip that one. Actually, no, I won't. I have to do them all, right? So I'm gonna try a new thing where maybe I keep everything really light and maybe I make everything else around it really dark instead. So I'm going to add more dark area around the shapes, around these teapots. And the idea is to explore. Okay, and then I know she's going to be white, her apron's going to be white, and then we'll make these things here lighter. And then let's see here. I'm just kind of going back and forth here. I make these areas dark, mid-gray. All right, and I have the light gray value everywhere. And that's 1, 2. Let's see. They do want to have more contrast. I don't know if I have enough contrast here. Okay. All righty. So there's one. All right, we'll do the next one here. It's going to be a dark gray. And I'll start off with my whites, figure out where my brightest whites are going to be. Her apron is always going to be the lightest. And his hair. And I'm going to play with making this teapot down here really light. Okay. Now I'm going to play with the darkest areas and I make all these things really dark. This is black. So now I'm kind of using the black as a shape to kind of outline the pots. And I'm going to use the medium gray now. Or let's use the light gray. Did I use that one already? I guess I did. Let's use the medium gray then. Oh, everything is already kind of medium gray. Okay, that's fine. All right, and then I'll make the Mad Hatter a little bit darker, and then I'm going to make this guy darker. See, this isn't really working. So, because now I'm losing my March hair. I don't see him at all. So I don't know if I like that one. All right. I'm going to go to this bottom one down here, the dark gray. And I'll set up my lights. Okay. Set up my medium lights. Okay, I'm gonna play with, instead of making all of, I'm gonna make the area around the pots kind of a light gray. And that'll be like the steam. Okay. I'll go into the medium gray. I'll make all the pots medium gray. Oops. And we're gonna use the dark gray. Dark gray is kind of already there in all these areas here. Make them a little bit darker. If I look at the March hair where he reads, he's kind of dark. I think I need to add some light gray to him. I'm going to add the dark gray to the little mouse there. And I'm going to keep adding some light grays back here. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the black. Oops. And the black is really just, it's not going to be totally black. Okay, and then I'll probably add some shadows around there. All right, kind of like this one. I like this one, the way this one's reading. I should probably add some of the fireworks. Okay, and then maybe add some highlights with the lantern, maybe some cup highlights, and then some teapot highlights. And yeah, I think, see, I like this one so far the best. All right. This one's reading well to me. All right, so like, let's say this is the one that I like, but I need to go in and make some adjustments. All right, so then what we're going to do is we're going to take this color, this value comp, and we're going to add some color to it. Okay, so I'm going to take this one. I have my line art here and my value scale here. I'm going to, on Clip Studio Paint, I'm going to select both of those layers, this one, and I'm going to click on this little checkbox down here. Okay. And I want to select just this one here, the one that I like. So I'm going to use my rectangle selection tool. and I'm going to copy it. I can push copy here, or if I hear this is copy and paste. So I can press copy and paste, and what's going to happen is it's going to duplicate those two layers over here up at the top. Now this one is locked, so I have to unlock that layer. But when I select those two and I press scale rotate, you can see that now I have this separate, which is great. So I'm going to just move this over here, and I'm going to turn off the other layers here. I'm going to take this layer here. Okay, and I'm going to merge these layers together. Right here, up at this layer here, you can say merge selected layers, and because they are selected, right here, I'm going to merge these selected layers and they'll become one layer. Okay. Alrighty. So now what I'm going to do is, since this is, the comp that I did, my black and white value comp that I like, let's say I'll use this one. I'm going to duplicate this 6 times 2. All right. So one way I can do that and duplicating it is here, press duplicate layer, and it duplicates the layer. I have to move that layer away from it, and I have 2. Okay. Another way you can do it is if you are on the move tool, you get this little arrow, and if you press Alt and drag that, it automatically copies it and duplicates it onto another page. Okay. I can do that again, and I can do that again. I can do that again. All right. So I used the Alt and the move layer, and that basically duplicated them all. I'm still on the move layer tool. So when I'm on the move layer tool, I can move any of these around. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge all of these layers together. And how I merge them is I'm just going to click all of these here, put the highlight on, and I can either press Control E. No, I can't press Control E. I can't do that in this one. It's in Photoshop. I'm going to do this merge selected layers here. And now they're all on one layer. Okay, so now I have a value of scale from what I've done. I've got 6 different versions. All right, and now what I can do is, let's say I want to play with the color in terms of, yeah, I'm gonna show you how to do that next. All right, so I'm going to select just one of these. We're going to do adjusting the hue saturation. So we're going to do next. Sorry, we're going to jump to number 3, using value scale and color. I'm going to show you how to use gradient maps. Okay. So in gradient maps is a way that you can adjust or add color based on a gradient of value. And the same way that you have the gradient over here, you can create a gradient of color on your value scale. Okay. So if we go into layer and we make a new correction layer under the layer, because we're adjusting the layer. So when we're adjusting the layer, we're in the layer menu, we go to new correction layer, and under new correction layer is at the very bottom gradient map. And when you click on gradient map, this lovely menu pops up. And up at the top is the gradient map of lights to darks. And what it's going to do is it's going to assign a color based on the value of this gradient map. And you can see that there's already some selected or default colors here. So I'm going to choose a default, let's choose a default purple. Okay. Okay. So when I've chosen the default purple, you can see how it automatically fills in the colors based on the values that I have in this illustration. And I've also, you have to select the area that you want this to affect. If I didn't select the area, it would affect all of the things underneath. Because I've created a selection using my selection tool over here, what it's done is it's created a mask. And you can see on the layer menu over here that there is a little black square with a white rectangle inside of it. That's my layer mask. That means that whatever I do on this adjustment layer, it's only going to affect what is being seen behind this, what's being visible behind the mask, okay? Now, the fun thing here is that you can adjust these colors. You can adjust where they are by putting your arrow or putting your cursor on any of these little nodules here, and you can adjust how much color is going to be in the lights or the darks, okay? You can adjust whether you want it to be darker or lighter. If I bring this all the way down right here, you'll see that it's adjusting it. Now, what I want you to notice here is that in this somber color shade, that it actually doesn't go from light to dark all the way. It actually goes from light to dark, and then it goes to a lighter gray. Now, if you want to change that, you can change it by clicking on the little nodule here, okay? And when you see that, notice how the specified color comes up down here. If I were to click on this one, that color comes up. That means it gives you a chance to adjust these colors. So let's say I wanted to just play with only the darkest colors in my gradient scale. I'm going to make them all this magenta dark color. So I'll press OK. And now all of my dark areas are magenta colored. And that's kind of nice because that's the color of the chair, which is what I've drawn behind there. And then that kind of creates a harmonious thing with everything else. Okay, now let's say I don't want this dark gray here. If I don't want this one, I can select it and then I can press trash or delete node and it will omit that. Now let's say you want to add a color. All you have to do is see if you hold your cursor along the bottom of the gradient map tool, there is a plus sign that comes up. That means you can add a new node. And when you add a node, all you have to do is click on that node, click on the color, and it will adjust the color. You can choose a new color. So I'm going to choose, let's see what happens when I choose this color. I have no idea what I'm doing. All right, that's interesting. Let's say I don't like that. Let's say I want it to be navy blue. Or maybe I want it to be a little bit lighter. So I'll press that. And now it's changed all of that to navy blue. Okay, let's say that my medium value, I want to change that to like more of a, I don't know, let's try yellow. Let's see what happens when I do that. It's going to be really crazy. It literally just changes those values because I don't have any gradation in tones. I just have flat tonal values. So everything that's gray becomes yellow, which is funny. And so I end up getting like the face of the characters are yellow too. And I can change this pink. I can make that to, you know, like maybe a brighter yellow. And see now, you see all that's happening here, getting a bright yellow. And then my white areas, I can make that, I can leave that as like a light pink or something. All right, so you can see the craziness that you can get from adjusting these gradient maps. You can even play with how much color is in one area. Okay, okay? Or you can use only a certain area and select out a certain area in each particular illustration. So I'm going to cancel all of this, okay? And I'm going to do it again with just a very subtle color. Under layer, new correction layer, gradient map, and I'm going to choose somber yellow. So my grayish area here, this is a all analogous color or monochromatic because it's all yellow. But let's say I wanted to make it yellow and maybe a warm color here. So I'm going to choose like, oops, a warmer color here. Okay, and so now you can see how they've got a really warm dark brown. And for here, I'm going to make it more of like an orange. I'm going to make this a little bit, maybe I'll get rid of this color here, or I'll change that color. Oh, that's too much. Okay. If I delete this one, delete that one out. Okay, I think I like that. Okay, so this is one way to create, to do it in a way that's non-destructive. You can create various color comps by using the gradient map. Let's see, go to, where did it go? Layer, new correction layer, gradient map. Okay, now I'm going to choose like, and there's also other things here too. There's sky. Oh my gosh. Let's see what happens when I try sunrise. That's wacky. So you can actually click on all of these and see what happens with all of them. You can play around with them. Sunset, that is insane. I don't think I want that.
Larissa, how do you bring that palette up?
The palette,
Yeah,
right
that
here
you're in
under the
gradient.
gradient set at the very top, your default when it opens up,
Oh,
it
the
opens up
whole
under
palette
somber
there, the
shade.
gradient map.
The
And
gradient
where
map,
is that? Yeah, where is that located?
layer, because you're adjusting the layer. You want to, you're
Okay.
basically making a correction layer. And that's under layer, new correction, gradient map. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that's one way of doing that. Let's see. I'm going to choose that again. I want to make sure I have time for the other things that I want to show. Okay. So that's one way of creating a color. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to use the AI colorization. Okay. On this layer here, actually, I'm going to go back to just having my line work. Okay. So I'm going to click my line work here, and I'm on the line layer, and I'm going to try and see. Yeah, this is fun, right, Kara? Gradient map's really cool. So one thing you can do is, oh, by the way, this is what I wanted to show you before I move on from that. Thanks for making that comment. It just jogged my memory. One thing you can do, okay, so let's say you want to do a gradient map for all of that stuff, okay, make all of that there. All right. You can make a gradient map for any selection, okay? So I'm going to make a selection. I'm using the polyline selection tool. And I'm going to select out just my main characters here. And I'm doing it really dirty rough. Okay, but I want to show you how this works. Oops. Okay, I'm going to go back to where I started. Okay, so now you can see I have all this selected. I'm going to clean up my selection a little bit. I'm going to show you how you can do that in the selection tool for polyline. Under subtool, you can add to your selection or subtract to your section. So I cut off her nose a little bit. So clicking on add selection, I'm going to zoom in a little bit and you can see that all I have to do is make another selection and close it and it'll add to that selection here. Now I don't want this little gap here because she's got her arm silhouetted there. So I'm going to switch to the remove from selection tool and that will subtract from my selection there. And all I have to do is close it up and now all of that is deselected. Okay, so I want to add his hand here. I just have to go back and close the gap. Okay, so I'm going to make another gradient map on top of this one, but it's going to be just for Alice and the Mad Hatter. So I'm going to go into layer again, new correction layer, gradient map, and I'm going to change them to, let's see, let's change that to red, just so you can see what happens. Hold on. Actually put that above. Okay, I'm going to put that above there. All right. So I had it actually below the layer underneath. And this is important where it's at in the layer stack. This is a smaller selection and I have to make sure it's above the other gradient map. Okay, so now you can see that you can create gradient maps for any kind of selection that you want. Let's say I wanted to do a different gradient map for the March Hare. I'll do that too. Oops. Okay, I'm gonna draw this. Okay. And then remove this. This is the T. Okay. I'm going to make sure I'm on the top of my layer stack. I'm going to go to layer, another correction layer, gradient map, and I'm going to make him red, maybe somber shade red. But then here I'm going to I'm going to get rid of that nodule. Click on this one and make that more of a brown. Okay, and I'll get rid of that one. Actually, let's make that even darker. Okay. I can make that more of a yellow. And there's not a whole lot of yellow there. It's mostly dark. Okay, but you can see how you can adjust these. These are all correction layers. Okay, so that was using the selection tools. All right, so now what I'm going to do is show you how to use AI, artificial intelligence. We're going to go back to this line layer. And we're going to see what kind of colorization Clip Studio will give us. Okay. So where was it? It was colorize, under edit, colorize technology, and we're going to do colorize all. I'm going to press OK, and it's going to give me some random crazy color. Oh, okay. So it's giving me this crazy color. I don't really like that. But now I know this is the coloring that it will give me. Okay, so that's great to know. All right, so now what I want to show you is how, if you, let's say you didn't want to do values and you just wanted to do colors. I have these colors up here that I need to make sure, well, I mean, these are my reference colors. I can use these colors as reference, and then I can adjust everything in my color comp afterwards. So I have a little color layer down here. And what I'll do is I'll color pick from everything here. And I'm just going to put in the flat colors of what exists, what everything is. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'm going to use the lasso fill tool for that. And what I want to show you is, well, what I want to show you really quick is how to do using selections in a really fast, in a really easy way, to create really clean color. I didn't do that on the other one. I filled in, let's see here. I filled in the Mad Hatter with all green, okay? When you want to select anything that's on a layer, the way that you do that is make sure you're on the layer. Let's say I want to select out just the green. There's a couple ways I can do that. I can use the magic wand tool and I can select the green right here, and all of it is selected. Now, when you're using the magic wand tool, there is a subtool information down here where it says tolerance. The lower the tolerance is, the more specific you will get with your magic wand tool. Okay. If I increase the tolerance, it says it's like it's less tolerant. So it'll take in more colors. See, when I increase the tolerance on the magic wand, it's basically saying I'm not just going to take the yellow, but I'm going to take other colors that are similar to it. Okay. So when I take this, it's selecting all this gray and all of this orange. You know what it means to be less tolerant, right? You're more accepting of others. So to lower the tolerance, it means you're not as accepting of other people. That's basically the same thing that is happening with the magic wand. You lower the tolerance and it lowers the specificity, or increases the specificity of what it's going to select. See, you can see how it's made it really specific. Okay, so anyway, that's how you use selections. Another way that you can create a selection, if you wanted to select everything on your layer, you would basically go to your layer, the thumbnail. You want to hover over the thumbnail, and using your keyboard, you would press Control. I'm on a Mac, and I'm not on a Mac, but I think on Mac you would press Command. If you press Control and hit the thumbnail, what that does is it automatically selects everything on that layer. Okay. Now, once you have everything selected on that layer, you can actually add things to that layer. You can make a new layer and add things to just that selected area on another layer. And by doing that, this is a non-destructive way of changing colors or adding colors or doing any kind of variation without destroying what you already have. This is non-destructive, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, color pick using the wand tool. My tolerance is kind of low, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to fill in the color for the March Hare, and I only have him selected, so that's fine. I'm going to do that here. And now what I can do is I can just kind of, I'm going to get a big brush this time. Let's see, I'll use watercolor. I'm going to use the paint and apply. That one's kind of big, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to color pick that. And is that even going to work? Is that the same color? Oh yeah, it is the same color. Okay, well that one's actually a little too, I want this to be, I chose the wrong color. Let's just go to, I know, we'll go to pen. Okay. I'm just going to use the Real G pen because that has a really nice sharp tip. All right, and I'm going to color pick all these areas. Color pick, his skin is like super pink, which is really funny. And then his hair is light gray. And
Is that a default pen?
This is a default pen. It's under the pen tool.
Okay.
It's just a Real G. It's Real G. I don't know why it's called the Real G, but that's what it is. Okay. All righty. So I think that's, oh wait, I want to get his color for his hands here. And okay, that's good. All right, I'm going to magic wand, and I'm going to select the March hare. Now he's only selected, and now all I have to do is just pick the colors from that and add those in. He's got yellow hair. Yellow hair up here.
Those colors are looking great.
Yeah, they're fun, right?
Yep.
Okay, and then he's got a little bit of a pink thing here. All righty, and then that looks good. And then I'm going to deselect that, and now I'm going to just kind of color pick and just kind of start painting things in. Okay. Oops. And now I'm going to just choose these random colors for these teapots. Pink. And I know all these teapots have particular colors, but I'm just going to pull them randomly here. The teapot with the mouse is kind of this yellow color. And then the mouse is kind of wearing like a little purple thing. And I'm gonna, okay. And I'll just keep pulling some colors from the teapots here. And then these are like, let's see, let's get this purple one here. I want these to be a little bit lighter here. And then I want the puffs of steam to maybe be a little bit of a blue color. And then I want, I'm going to use the background be a little bit dark behind them because I want the fireworks to be showing up. Actually, let's use a purple. And then I'll just choose some of these colors for the lamps. Okay. And then I'm going to choose this color, bright color for his teapot there. And alrighty. Okay, so those are, let's say, my basic colors on my color comp for that one. If you wanted to play around with that, I'm going to just take this and I'm going to play with, first I'm going to play with like adjusting the colors, and then I'm going to play with lighting and shading, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it. I've selected it. I'm going to copy it and paste it. Where is my copy? Copy and paste right here. Did I copy and paste it? Yeah. Okay. And now I'm gonna move it over here. Okay. And I think I have. Oops. Okay, I have 3. All right. So you're saying, why would I want to adjust this? Well, what if I want to make this more of a limited color palette? And I wanted them to be really like all harmonious. Okay. So one way that I can do that to make them all harmonious is I'm going to take one of these colors from here and kind of apply it to all of them. Or maybe I'll make, maybe I'll choose this yellow color here. Okay. And I'm going to create an overlay layer or multiply layer on top of it. And it's going to basically tint all of them and it'll make all of the colors harmonious. So on a new layer here, I'm going to select this out here and I'm going to fill it with the yellow. Okay. When I fill it with the yellow, you're going to see how it's all completely yellow, right? Obviously. What I want to do is I want to turn this into like just a tint. So I'm going to switch it from normal to multiply. Where's multiply? Up here. Okay. And what that does, multiply acts as a, basically it turns your layer from opacity to transparent. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce this down to like 30%. And now what I have is all these colors that I just randomly picked. Now they're
Larissa, where are you reducing it?
sorry, I'm reducing it down at the top of the layer stack in the opacity. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Layer opacity.
So that's one way to create unified color harmony, is choosing a color and applying that as like a tint, as a multiply layer, and you can lower the opacity so that it's very, very subtle. If I just put like 20%, what that does is it changes the color. It makes everything kind of more warm, which is actually really nice. I kind of like that. So now that everything's really harmonious. Do you like that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it's pretty. So you can do it either way. Another thing that you can do. What?
It's great. It's good to see.
There's so many ways that you can mess with color. It's insane, which is why I'm covering it all today, because I didn't go over it before. Another thing that you can do is, let's say you want to just play around with that color. Let's do, you can adjust this and see what it looks like as other colors in an adjustment layer. Okay, so we're going to go to layer. We're going to go to new correction layer, and we're going to change the color or the hue of it. So we're going to go to hue, saturation, luminosity, right? So now what I'm doing is I'm effectively changing the color of everything underneath it. All right. So actually what I want to do is I want to make, sorry, I'm going to do that again. New correction layer, hue saturation, and I'm going to alter the hue. Now what's happening is it's going to alter everything underneath it. I don't necessarily want to alter everything underneath it. I just want to alter the layer underneath it. So once I alter the hue, look at, I'm changing it a little bit. I can increase the saturation of it. That's really wacky. It's super pastel-y. That makes it really bright. Or if I wanted to dull it down a little bit, I can desaturate it. I can increase the luminosity of it to make it really, really like pastel colored. That's kind of nice too. I'm going to press OK. So right now this hue saturation layer is affecting everything underneath it. You can see that. It's even affecting my artwork over here. Let's say I just want it to affect this layer here. I'm going to make this only apply to the layer below by making it a clipping layer. Clip to the layer below. If I click here, then now you see this little pink bar on the layer stack that comes up, and you can see that it's only applied to this layer right here. Okay. So if you wanted to see what colors this would look like, and you don't want to change it, you just want to play around with it, you can make another adjustment layer and alter it. Okay. Why would you want to do this? Well, I don't know. Maybe you want to change the color palette of your artwork. Maybe you want to see what would happen. And this is a great way to create interesting color palettes you hadn't thought of before. Let's say you're always drawing trees green and brown, and you want to just do something different. You want to try to create something unique and exciting. This is a place where you can play around with that and change things up a little bit. All right. So once you do that and you like the way it looks, all you have to do is take a screenshot of it, and it flattens your image. Okay. And then you can use that as your color rough, just the way that I did. Okay. Now let's say you've got all this, you really like it. Let's see, I'm going to go back and say, like, I like this one here. Okay. I'm going to make everything is really light underneath it. So what I'm going to do right now is underneath this layer, I'm going to make a new layer. Everything is white underneath it. I don't want everything to be white underneath it anymore. I want everything, because I didn't color everything in. I was very, very loose with it all. So I'm going to choose this light gray color here. I just color picked it from that. That's like basically my smoke color or my steam color. And I'm going to fill it in. So now there's no white. Everything is kind of blue. Okay. I'm going to merge that layer below. Okay. So now I have all this one layer. Right. Now let's say you've just done your flat color, but you want to do lighting and shading. We haven't even talked about tonal values in this. We're just talking about color. Okay. So let's say you want to add some light and shadow to everything, right? Guess what? We're going to do that now. Okay. In the last 15 minutes. All right. So how do we do that? We're going to do an overlay layer or a screen dodge layer for light. And we're going to add our lights into it. And then we're going to add our shadows into it. Okay. And this is all just a color comp. This isn't like the final artwork. This is just, you're still playing around, seeing what you want to do with everything before you begin your final work. All exploration. The more you play and the more you explore your options of what's possible, the more solid or sure you'll be of what you are wanting to do. And then the end result is just rendering. So what I'm doing with my soul piece, all I'm doing is just rendering. I'm not worried about color or anything. All I'm going to do is be picking color from the areas of my artwork here. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a light layer. So on my layer stack, I'm going to make this a little bit higher. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to set this to overlay. Okay. Now I'm going to choose a warm light. So I'm going to go for like orange and orangey yellow. And I'm going to choose my real G pen. I'm just going to use a really flat color here. Okay. Now, when I paint with this color, you can see that it's making everything around it lighter, or it's making everything light. And it's making everything warm because I'm using this light color. Now, some of you probably already do this. This is a really common tool for creating flat, easy color for comics. And this is what I'm doing in my comic, is I'm using like an overlay layer for light. Okay, now if it's too intense, you can see, if it's too intense, you can always lower the opacity here. Okay, so that it's not as bright. But what happens is this way, it allows you just to create a same kind of consistent warm light on everything without, and it adjusts the color underneath. Well, these are all lanterns, so I'm going to make these have a little bit of a glow. Okay. And all right. This is really super messy, super, super messy. Okay.
It's super trippy.
It's super trippy. I know it's kind of bizarre looking. All right. I'm going to make a shadow.
Can you lighten her nose? Can you fix her nose? It's really
Is that bothering you? Of course.
It is the case of the disappearing nose.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah, I've got a bad lag on my end. I don't know if anyone else has.
Yeah, it might be my internet. I'm so sorry. There we go.
I love the looseness of this.
Thank you. I mean, it's just for playing at this point, right?
I know.
Okay. So I fixed that color layer there. I'm gonna put the overlay layer there. Okay, now I'm gonna add some shadows. I'm gonna make a new layer. New layer. I'm gonna set this one to multiply. And that's gonna make everything transparent. And I'm gonna choose my shadow color. I'm gonna use a purple, a cool color for my shadow. And now when I do that, everything's gonna be, I'm gonna actually lower the opacity already so you can see that it's just gonna create a shadow for everything. I can add a shadow under these elements here. I can add a shadow on the bottom of my pots. Each of these pots or these cups here. These cups here on the back of him. And on the back of Alice. And I can add some shadows too, like the clouds or the teapot areas. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's one way of creating shadow and light using the overlay and the multiply layers. Okay, so I've got lots of different color comps here. I've got lots of different methods of creating options of things to try for doing my final version. So let's say this is kind of what I want. I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit more. Let's say I still want to make an adjustment on this. Like maybe this is still a little too bright. You can always make a new adjustment layer. Let's see, I want to go back. Put that yellow on top of there. I'm gonna lighten that up a little bit. You can always adjust anything that you're doing in Photoshop or Clip Studio under the new correction layers, okay? So let's say this is still a little too saturated for me and I want to desaturate it a little bit. I can lower this here. Is it going to desaturate it? Yeah, it's desaturating. You can see how it's just graying everything out a little bit more. Okay. What if I want to make it a little bit lighter? Actually, is it doing that? Oh, sorry. It's not because it's on, let's make it on top of, let's make it on the very top of our layer stack. Okay, so it'll adjust everything. Layer, new correction layer. Okay. Let's say I want to lighten everything up a little bit, make it more pastel-y. Oh, that's nice. And make it a little bit more desaturated. So it's really, really, really light and pastel color. That's really pretty. I like that. And I'm not going to change the hue at all. Okay. So let's say I really love that. I like that. I like that a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a screen grab of it. Okay. File, new. Okay. I'm going to paste it. And this is my color rough. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete my illustration by making everything really neat. I'm going to use this as a layer below, and on top of it, what I'll do is I'll start cleaning things up and I'll make things really neat. So I can do that now. And I'm going to put it on a second layer on top. And what I'm doing is just closing the gaps on everything, covering up my line work. You can see that I'm using this textured pen. So this is going to be really kind of fun, the way this looks.
The real G pen is a textured pen.
Yeah, it seems like it is. It's got a really rough kind of line to it. Mm-hmm. Nice. And that's really cool because it's a nice, it gets really thin, but if I push down on it, I get a really thick, I can get a really thick stroke, which is nice. I want to be able to kind of like use the same pen over and over again. I don't want to keep switching tools. Oops. Let's make his eyes here. Let's just cover it all in and then oh, he looks really crazy now. Okay. I can use this kind of light purple. Maybe I'll use this a little bit darker. Okay. All right, so this is basically how I do a lot of my illustrations. You can see how much work I've put into just playing with the color. I really love color and I love what is possible with it. But sometimes it's hard to discover what you can do, especially if you don't have that wild and crazy bend in you. So this way, using color in this way allows you to see, I'm going to still have the colors that are accurate with relative to these characters, but they're not they're not exactly, they're not these colors that came straight from the screen, right? So there's a lot more intention in these because I've really played with developing the color, and now my color palette is going to be like harmonious, but it'll still have the accuracy of the characters. And I can, exaggerate these in however way I want. And that'll be a lot of fun to do. Okay. That is it. Does anybody have any questions? It's kind of a lot.
Nope.
Not really.
Okay. Is that helpful at all?
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
Very helpful.
It was a lot.
Yeah, and it was hard to follow, but that's how it is, especially when you're an old girl.
It was a doozy. The recording will be available for you. You guys can see it. I guess can this work with different art applications? Absolutely. Yeah, why not? You can do a lot of the stuff that I did in Photoshop. So I do have the tendency to be like a fire hose with information. But I wanted to show you what's possible. If you only use one of the methods that I showed you, that's great, right? You only need to use one. I just showed you lots of different options though.
So look, I have a question.
Yeah.
So all this is flat color, and my understanding of gradients is that they move from one color and gradate into another color.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's, yeah.
I didn't really see that here.
Okay, so if I were to do a gradient, let me do a new one here. Let me just go to this Chock. Okay.
Maybe what about maroon color behind the cake?
Well, if I were to do like a gradient of okay, no, let me do like a color pencil. Okay. So the gradient map works when you have soft changing of color. I think what I did was my gradient map was, it didn't really have a gradient because it had sections of color. But if I were to do a correction layer on top of this, like I did before with the gradient map, and you could see now how that is more softly changing because the values were softly changing there.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can change that here or here, however you want. So that's really fun because then if you want to add color to something, but you're not sure what color to add, you do know how to do light and dark values, but you're not really strong with color. This is one way to approach it.
Yeah, that's great.
Fun, right?
Thanks, Dawn.
You're welcome. All right. Well, that was lots, but hope that was helpful. It's available for watching again.
Okay.
I'll see you guys later.
Okay. See you all on Tuesday.
See you on Tuesday. Bye.
Okay, bye.